Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another longer Christmas video, because as usual, I couldn't decide on what colors, so I was like, let's do them all. So anyway, I am using the Glistening Snowflakes stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. This came out a month ago, I think. I forget. It's been super popular with good reason. It's gorgeous. Gorgeous. I've had plans for this set from the second I saw it. So I am using the coordinating wafer dies with these 3 snowflake ornament images. I have the dies like face down on my cardstock here. And then this way I can line up these stamps, because my issue is those the long thin like string portion. I want to make sure those are stamped straight so that when I go and die cut them, they're not wonky, you know, and I end up die cutting half of it off. So that helps me just get those placed properly. And then I have all 3 here, and this is a piece of just A2 watercolor paper. It was slightly bigger than A2 watercolor paper that I've cut down. And I have the smooth side of the watercolor paper facing up. And I had some space on there, so I was like, oh, might as well heat emboss my sentiment at the same time. I was going to do that all separately, but I was like, why not? Why not? So I'm using the Christmas Blessings set, another favorite that was also, like, this set's been crazy popular with good reason. Love it. And there's coordinating wafer dies for it, which is also why I did this, because I was like, ooh, I can stamp it and heat emboss it and do all the shimmer, everything, and then die cut it, and life will be perfect. So, Canson watercolor paper, smooth side up, stamps are all lined up, anti-static powder tool, inked up the stamps with clear embossing ink, and then I'm heat embossing with gold embossing powder. And for my little pressure tool, I'm using the pink fresh one. I purchased this recently just because it looked really, really cute online, and I was like, I must own it. Any pressure tool works great. I love my little Stampin' Bugs that Robin sent me. If you look, she's on Etsy, I think, if you look up Stampin' Bug. And I've shown that in a bunch of videos. People have been asking about my whiteboard eraser that I was showing in previous videos. That still works wonderfully. I just don't know where mine went. It grew legs and walked off, and I haven't been able to find it. Any pressure tool works great. You know, this pink fresh one's just nice. The knob on it is a little odd in a sense. I haven't figured out the best way to hold it, but it's pretty. And the felt pad's really thick. It works great. I have a honeybee one that works great too. Anyway, any of those sorts of tools, you know, even like pulling the sleeve over your hand and pressing, it's the whole point of it is just to sort of alleviate pressing so much with your fingers. You know, because as we're all getting older and joints are starting to hurt and all the fun things that come with that, any little tool that helps alleviate is great in my books. So that's what I'm using. And I just did this process over and over and over again until I did 6 panels altogether that I'd stamped with these images with the clear embossing ink, and then I'm coating it with the gold embossing powder from Simon, and then melting with my heat tool. My container, that's multiple containers with the gold embossing powder. No one needs this much. I just, over the years, it got to the point where I just had so many multiple containers. I was like, you know, and I do make a lot of cards because this is my job. So that's why I have them in that container. But honestly, just one container of embossed powder is going to last a person a very long time. So, because I get asked that too, like, how many containers of embossing powder is that? And I honestly have no idea, but it's probably like 5-ish. Something. It's a lot. And yeah, like that will last me. But again, I'm doing like multiple cards, yada, yada, yada. Anyway. Once I was done on my panels, I'm using a hardboard and somewhat taping these down. I don't need to fully tape them like I do with like when I'm doing like watercolor painting and all that kind of stuff. This is more just to hold the watercolor cardstock down so that it doesn't completely curl up with all the water that's sprayed. And even that, I don't mind when it curls up because it kind of flattens as it dries. But when it curls up, everything just kind of runs off the edges. So I use a bit of painter's tape it down to a hardboard. It just keeps things a little more kosher. And then for the shimmer powder, I'm using my tonic shimmer powders. I have an entire playlist here on YouTube with a bunch of videos because I have used these a lot. I will link to that playlist at the end because I've used them in so many ways. I love them. There's other ones. There's the Lindy's ones. I have them. I haven't used them in a video yet. I know. Yeah. Those are fabulous too, I'm sure. I keep reaching for these because I've used them for years. So anyway, with the shimmer powders, the Nouveau ones specifically, do not squeeze the bottle. You do it once, you'll understand exactly why I say that. I'm always tempted to because sometimes I get a little impatient and I'm like, but the minute you squeeze those bottles, you will get like a tablespoon worth of powder coming out. It's crazy. So I just lightly tap my finger, get a little bit of powder, and you don't need much. The more you play with these, you start getting a little more of a feel of it. And I always tell everyone, don't muck with it after you spray it with water. I mucked with it. I couldn't help myself. I was just messing around, sticking my fingers in it, using a tissue. I was having fun. You know, it's not the end of the world. It's just, again, it's better left alone. But anyway, it always looks like a hot mess when you spray it with water. It looks horrible. Doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're doing it over a stamped image or you're just doing backgrounds or anything. With these powders, it just looks weird. It looks messy and just not fun when you spray it heavily with water. You know, everything's just kind of going around and it's just like, ugh. Like this just is starting to look like, ugh, you know? But walk away from it, let it dry. Always. Because even me, I'm just like, I have to always remind myself. And that's why I was sitting here mucking with it. You know, like trying to make it look prettier, even though I know better. So like I always say to everyone, do as I say, not as I do. And just leave it be. Trust me, when you come back to it, it always looks completely different, especially like they are magical in that sense. That's, I think, also why I love them so much, because they go from powder to this crazy mess of a disaster when you spray them with water, and then they dry to this gorgeous shimmery goodness that just I could not replicate on my own for the life of me. You know, that's, I think, another reason why I like them, because I am very much a control freak. And even doing things like messy watercolor and that sort of stuff, like that took me years to, you know, get over myself. And with these, they do their own thing. You know, the colors go in their own direction and things move and the water and all the stuff. But all of that said, I still mucked with these, you know, sticking my fingers in it and yeah, messing around with a tissue, picking up color. Whatever. They still turned out great. You know, but you do just need to like trust the process a bit. Like I could have just set these aside. Like right now, this looks like a hot mess, but you set it aside and you let it dry and you work on other things. So I mucked with them a bit. I set those all aside and let them just air dry, and they don't take that long. It kind of depends. That was also, some of the tissue was reasonable because I was, you know, sopping up some of the excess liquid, because obviously the more water you spray, the longer it's going to take to dry. But while those were drying, I worked on the backgrounds for these, and I'm using one of Simon's Snowflake embossing folders. I'm using the Snowflake Visions embossing folder. This came out last year. It's beautiful. Another option, because I think this one's actually sold out right now, but another option is the FACETED Snowflakes embossing folder. And that one actually would have even been better for this, because the FACETED Snowflakes isn't as deeply embossed, but I broke that one. And you can technically tape them back together, but I destroyed it at some point last year. I can't even remember exactly what happened. I like wrecked it beyond repair. And then I forgot to order a new one. So I will link to it though, because it is another fabulous option. Any snowflake folder will work. Simon's got a bunch of them. I just wanted you know, snowflakes for the background. You could also like white or clear heat emboss a snowflake background. That would look really nice too. But I wanted the texture. So for Simon's folders specifically, my perfect go-to with my Platinum 6 like Spellbinders machine is the platform and 2 metal cutting shims and the folder. There are other ways to do the shims and different things, and I haven't yet bothered to figure it out with the new platform system that I've shown in videos. So I just use the old one because it just works. So after I did, and all those, the cardstock pieces, it was hard to see on camera because you couldn't, I was holding the bottle up really high, but I lightly misted them with water before I ran them through with the embossing folder. It just helped them, you know, get a better impression. So these backgrounds are now, my shimmer backgrounds are now dry, and it's amazing how completely different they look when they're dry. So once those were dry, I used the coordinating wafer dies to die cut them all. And I didn't show this, but actually when I removed those wafer dies from the like background, the tape held in place and held them all. So it actually made it really quick and easy to just slap them down onto the next piece, press the tape in a bit, and run it through again. And I just repeated that process till I die cut all of the shimmer pieces. And then I was planning on just popping all those onto the backgrounds with a bit of foam tape. But then I was like, oh, these really thin, again, like the string portions, I was like, I do not want to cut teeny tiny pieces of foam tape. I don't have the patience for that. So instead, I just die cut a bunch of scraps of cardstock. This honestly was just, I would rather do this. This is easier and not as finicky for me. So I die cut scraps of purple cardstock, pink cardstock, and aqua cardstock with the coordinating wafer dies. And then just adhered them together to create dimension. You could always skip this step, but the dimension does give it that extra something. And because I used color cardstock scraps, it does just kind of enhance it a little bit. So I just, with things like this, I just kind of mindlessly tune out. You know, I'm watching a show or I'm listening to music or whatever, you know, and just, or in the case of these cards, it's like I would do one step and then deal with whatever random little disaster that was going on, come back, do the next step, deal with the next disaster, you know, all the things. But anyway, I stacked all my snowflakes and the sentiments. That's one of the main reasons why I love coordinating wafer dies for sentiments, because you can do things like that and it just, I don't know, it just makes them look so nice. So I had them all stacked. And while I was doing that, I was thinking about the backgrounds and I was like, you know, what would look really nice with these is some gold splatter. So I was also thinking about how I wanted to use those backgrounds, and I actually decided that I liked the back of them. So the smooth side with the snowflakes imprinted into them. Because I always use the other side, you know, with the raised image. But I was like, no, this would work great. And then the snowflakes will adhere really well. And it's just something different for me anyway. So I laid all of these out just on my big old flour sack cloth that I used to catch, you know, all the sprays and the inks and the things. And I heavily splattered these backgrounds with my Gonzai Tombi Starry Colors. That middle one, the gold, that I use for practically everything. And my little fan brush. So I heavily splattered all of these. And yeah, these got a chance to dry because I had to push one of my kids' vehicles out of the snow because they got stuck. Yeah, that was the other little mini disaster. So anyway, dealt with it. Life is great. Had a really helpful neighbor that also helped push the vehicle out because it took 2 adults to get it through the snow and ice. So anyway, let that dry, warmed myself up again, came back to this, and for the insides of the cards, I was originally just going to stamp the snowflakes, but this Christmas Blessings stamp set has so many sentiments and so many like larger-ish ones, and I was like, oh, I can, you know, put one on the inside of the card too. So I did the same thing. I gold heat embossed the sentiment onto the inside of all of my card bases, and all my card bases are top folding A2 size cards, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I used my MISTI to line up that sentiment, and then I would use my anti-static powder tool, ink up the sentiment, stamp it, coat it with that same gold embossing powder, and I would do like 3 at a time. I technically could have stamped, coated with embossing powder, set it aside, and done all 6 that way, and then heated them all at once. But I only have so much space, and I am also like, extremely clumsy. So I was like, no, 3 is my max, you know, and then I'll do 3, I'll heat emboss, then I'll do the next 3. That way, one, it doesn't take up as much space because I can just stack them all up, and also it just helps mitigate any potential disasters because, you know, I'm the type that would like knock a drink over onto it or something. So after I did that, I then took some of the individual snowflake stamps from the Glistening Snowflake set, and I stamped those onto the insides of the cards with some of Simon's Positively Saturated inks in colors that kind of went with each theme. So I used Seafoam ink, and then I'm using Carnation ink, and then Lilac ink. And I just had them on acrylic blocks. I could have lined them up in my MISTI too. That would have been same thing in the end, whatever works. So stamp those onto the insides of the cards, and I really love this set. Like, just these images alone, I'm more than happy with. And yet there's still like those two circular sort of snowflake images, and then the one that's like tree shaped. Like, so many ideas. Anyway, to adhere those snowflake backgrounds to my cards, you could just use like craft tacky glue, liquid glue. That would work. I just used score tape because it was faster. But yeah, anything is going to work. You just want a good, strong adhesive, because especially, again, it's the raised areas that I was adhering to the card base. So that's also why I chose the score tape, because it's good, strong adhesive. And I used the wider tape, so I only had to run like 3 pieces down each of those backgrounds, adhered them to the card base. And then I just adhered my snowflakes and my sentiments with the craft tacky glue. And I would stick them underneath my MISTI just for something to hold everything down while the glue dried. You could always stop here, but of course I'm going to add coordinating bling. Of course, like, I will find ways to throw the kitchen sink at it. So I have Trinity Stamps bling in colors that kind of went with everything. So I'm using Morganite Muse crystals for the pink cards. And my very first card, this first one, this is kind of like my template. When I'm doing like mass production or just several cards with the same layout, etc. My first card, I figure out the layout of the bling, and then I just repeat that over and over again with all the other ones, and it just goes super fast because it's like, hey, stick them all out, lay them all out, and adhere them into place. So for the aqua colored cards, I used aquamarine ripple crystals. And then for the purple ones, it was amethyst accent crystals. I like all these names. And I will have links, of course, like I always do, to all of the supplies. So I adhered everything. I was going to use or go through my stash and see if I'd like coordinating envelopes, you know, in similar colors. But instead, I decided to just use white envelopes and stamp them with more of the snowflake stamps. Because, again, I love them. They're so pretty. So pulled out some white envelopes from my stash, arranged a bunch more of the snowflakes from that set onto an acrylic block, and then just stamped it onto the lower corner of all of these envelopes, just making sure that I had the envelope like oriented properly. But in the end, it wouldn't matter if I'd stamped them on the wrong spot. Like, again, the snowflakes, just pretty little snowflakes on the envelope. So I did the same inks, that Seafoam ink, and then the Carnation ink and the Lilac ink on all of these envelopes. So the cards not only have like the shimmery matchiness and the snowflakes on the insides of the cards and the gold heat embossing, and really the only thing they could have done or added is maybe add a little bit of gold splatter to the envelopes. I just thought of that now as I'm doing the voiceover, and I'm like, oh. Although you could skip stamping envelopes and just pair them up with gold envelopes. That would have looked gorgeous as well. So again, options. But once I got all of my envelopes stamped, that's going to finish off these cards. I tried really hard to show the shimmer. I'm still getting used to this new camera. I mentioned this, I think, on my social media. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in any videos, but I'm using a different camera now in my most recent videos. This is the plan for doing eventual live streams. My only peeve so far with this camera is it's not as good at really picking up the sparkle as my previous camera. So I'm a little bit like, But the sparkle is there. It's just, you know, you guys, if you've watched my other videos, and again, I'll have a link to that playlist with the Nouveau Shimmer powders. I'm able to show the sparkle in those ones. I'm still going to fiddle with this setup and see if I can figure it out and see if there's a way I can properly show it. Because it is really, really pretty. Like that shimmer, chef's kiss. So I've got shimmer and texture and splatter and bling coordinating envelopes, all the fun things. And like I mentioned, I will have a link below the video to my blog post that'll have the photos and picture links to all of the supplies I used. I will have that supply list also just linked directly below the video for anyone who is interested. And then, of course, at the end of the video, I'll link to my shimmer powder playlist. I'll also link to my current holiday playlist that I will keep adding to as I get videos uploaded. So you can check those out below the video at the end, all of the things if you are interested. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos. Thumbs up, comment, subscribe if you hadn't. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye, guys.